Guys, Erin here. So I am doing something a little different today. I have wanted to do this for a couple of years, and I finally just kind of forced myself to find the time to do it. What I'm going to do is break down the natal chart of the one and only great Rudolf Steiner. If you don't know who Rudolf Steiner is, I strongly encourage you to look into at least some of his work. Okay, we're talking about thousands upon thousands of teachings from this man. And in my opinion, I think he was probably one of the most fascinating, incredible humans to really ever incarnate on this earth. What I'll do is I'll leave some links in the description below to some really good articles about this man, to what I think are his best books. And also there's a great YouTube channel that's called the Rudolf Steiner Audio Press. If you like to listen to stuff while you're driving, lectures and that sort of thing like I do, or, when I'm cleaning the house, I love to listen to this stuff. It's just this YouTube channel, this very distinguished gentleman who is reading some of the lectures from Rudolf Steiner. So I'll leave a link for that as well. But I think what I want to do first is share this Wikipedia page of Rudolf Steiner, so you kind of get an idea in case you're totally unfamiliar. So he is an Austrian occultist, a social reformer, an architect, an esotericist, a clairvoyant. This here it says acclaimed clairvoyant. I say with a whirlwind of confidence that this dude was a clairvoyant. This is probably his most popular, most recognized book, The Philosophy of Freedom. And that's the man right there. When we scroll down here, there's so much information on this page. I'm not going to go through all of it. That's him when he was young. There's another one here when he was only 21 years old. You can read about his early spiritual experiences. He was an incredible philosopher and writer. I think he published something like 330 volumes of books, that sort of thing. There he is again. Okay, we keep scrolling down here. The Theosophical Society. You can read about that. The Anthroposophical Society, which I find very fascinating. That kind of translates into human wisdom, which the teachings through this are really about the clear understanding that there is a spirit world that we can perceive and connect with through spiritual practices, things like meditation, that sort of thing. Okay, and we keep scrolling down. You can read about his political engagements and social agenda. There's just so much here. Spiritual research. Okay, keep scrolling down. Biodynamics. So biodynamic agriculture, there's a lot of little technicalities to this, but the basics of it is like working with the astral forces, working with the cosmic rays to get the best crops, like how to give your plants the best nutrients possible. Okay, and scrolling through here, anthroposophical medicine. Well, I'm just going to leave a link for this stuff because you guys can read about this yourselves. I don't want to take too long on this. I got to show you this though. This is, like I said, he's an architect. Look at some of these buildings. I personally have always wanted to live in a home with a dome building. I think that us living in these square boxes is not necessarily the best for our metaphysical energetics. Performing arts. It just goes on and on. Esoteric schools. He's the creator of the Waldorf schools. You can read about his philosophical ideas. It really does just go on and on and on and on. Spiritual science. In my opinion, I think that he's Edgar Cayce as well, but Rudolf Steiner is one of the main reasons that this day and age, especially with all the technology, we're so fascinated by combining spirituality with science, like kind of like metaphysics. Okay. He was very well recognized for spiritual science. Okay. It just goes on and on and on and on. So again, I'll leave a link for that, but let's get into his natal chart. In case you're super new here, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of his birth based on his location. Okay, with geocentric, that means we put him right here in the middle of this thing. Okay, these right here are the symbols for the celestial bodies. Like there's Saturn, there's the moon, over here is Jupiter, down here is Venus, here's the sun. When we go in the wheel just a little ways, these things are the glyphs for the zodiac signs that all those celestial bodies were beaming through onto Rudolf Steiner when he took his first breath of air. Now here we can see Rudolf Steiner, February 25th, 1861. Now, there was some debate on his actual birth date. Apparently, some people were saying that he was born February 27th. However, Rudolf Steiner had started an autobiography. I don't think it was ever actually technically finished, but in that the beginning of the autobiography, he wrote that he was born on February 25th, 1861 at 11:15 p.m., but he was baptized on February 27th. I actually looked at both charts. This chart really does resonate with me. As far as his location goes, I apologize. This is not his exact location. I am not going to try and butcher that. I do not know how to pronounce this where I'm moving my mouse. I could not find his exact location of birth, the town of his birth, on this software that I'm using. This is Time Passages. But this town it's just a few miles away. And not only that, you can even look up Rudolf Steiner's natal chart, through an internet search, and you'll see that this is very much accurate. Okay, so what I want to do first is I'm going to start out by talking about his sun. This right here is the symbol for the sun. This right here is the glyph for the sign of Pisces. So the sun is really what rules over our sense of identity, like our inner being, our vital force. Okay, and the sign of Pisces is very much recognized as like the psychic, the mystical psychic of the zodiac, okay? And at 7 degrees, this is 7 degrees, 21 minutes. He's born within the first 10 days of the Pisces season, which kind of makes it a very pure Piscean influence. And there's reasons why Pisces is considered like the most psychic sign. It's the last sign of the zodiac. It's the end of the cycle. It's like the sign that is least attached to the earth realm. A lot of Pisces people, kind of walk around this world thinking like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. This feels weird. Certainly not every Pisces is going to be like that because there's so much more to our natal chart other than just our sun sign. But also Pisces is ruled traditionally by Jupiter. Modern astrology ruled by Neptune. In my very strong opinion, it's clearly ruled by both. Jupiter influences things that are of a very philosophical and faith-based nature, which is very Piscean. But then Neptune, one of Neptune's jobs, like one of the biggest influences from Neptune, is putting holes in our psychic boundaries. Okay, we all have boundaries, all different sorts of unseen boundaries around us. And one of those sets of boundaries is to protect us from picking up on everybody else's thoughts and feelings and emotions, our psychic boundaries. Well, what Neptune does is puts holes in those boundaries. Pisces is very much recognized as a sign that has like the weakest boundaries. Okay, but that's in part what makes Pisces this very psychically tapped in energy. Okay, now one of the things that stands out to me most, this right here is a symbol for the rising sign or the ascendant. Okay, I'll go deeper into this momentarily, but for now, we can see that he was born as a Scorpio rising. Scorpio is like the next most psychic sign of the zodiac. Okay, Scorpio, when the sun goes through the sign of Scorpio, it's said to be when the time of year when the veil between worlds is thinnest. I mean, really, the water signs, Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces, are the ones that are like the natural empaths of the zodiac. Everything's based on feelings. So they're really kind of considered the most intuitive signs of the zodiac. In my opinion, Gemini and Aquarius can also be very, very intuitive, but just in a totally different way than the water signs. But going back to this, I don't know a single Scorpio rising that is not like incredibly deep and intense. It's like that sign is all about like spiritual willpower, okay, and transformation. Scorpio is the most intense sign of the zodiac. But what we see here is this very strong trine, this blue line that's going from the sun to his ascendant. Now, that all these lines that go through the chart, they're called aspects. They're all calculated through geometry. Specifically, a trine is approximately 120-degree angle. And what it influences is harmony, like through the sine waves. So the sun was making a harmonious connection to the horizon or to his ascendant when he was born. So we've got the two most psychic signs harmonizing together. The rising sign is like the lens that we see this whole experience through and the lens that others see us through. So this really enhances, that clairvoyance. Okay. But also what really stands out to me is this right here is Mercury and this right here is Neptune. we can see they're about 3 degrees, they're very technically 3 degrees away from each other. That's called a conjunction. Let's break this down. So Mercury is, in short, the ruler of our mental function. You know, we're constantly receiving information, no matter what the heck we're doing. We could be staring off into the abyss or super intensely focused on a book or something like that. Okay, we're just constantly receiving information. And that's Mercury that's bringing that information. Mercury has a very big influence on kind of the entire nervous system. The information being brought in through the nervous system and going into the spinal cord, but then also the information being brought back out to be able to communicate. Mercury is the messenger of the gods. A lot of people who are born with just Mercury in Pisces will be psychic. I actually know quite a few of them. I've actually known 2 animal psychics. A lot of people might question that stuff, but I tell you what, I got a reading for my dog one time and I could not believe the accuracy from this woman. I mean, she knew exactly where my dog, she knew nothing about me. She knew nothing about me. We exchanged. I gave her a reading. She gave me a reading for my dog. And she knew exactly where his injuries were. I mean, she lives in a totally different state. She's never even seen my dog before. And it was mind blowing. Her Mercury was in Pisces. Okay. Now, when we've got a conjunction here, Neptune, we just talked about this. Neptune is what puts holes in our psychic boundaries. And there's a great book. It's called the Encyclopedia of Medical Astrology. You look up Neptune in that book. Everything is, psychic capabilities from Neptune. So when 2 celestial bodies are close together, if you can envision, it's like Mercury's ray, okay? It's like a flashlight. Mercury's got a flashlight. That ray, the cosmic ray, is what influences, again, the information being brought into our conscious awareness and then being brought back out. And then Neptune's psychic energy being another ray. If you take those 2 rays of those 2 flashlights and put them very close together, it just is like one bright light. So we've got this conjunction. They're blending together through the very psychic sign of Pisces. So this really, really enhances, again, his extreme intuition. Okay, now let's start here. So these things that look like a slice of pie, they're called the houses. What they are, they're like themes of our life. They're the areas of our life where things manifest, where energy comes in. Okay, and this right here is the 5th house, which is often referred to as the house of children and creativity, which it can certainly have to do with us having children, but that's certainly not just what it is. Rudolf Steiner, at least there's no records of him having children, but when we make babies, we are creating something and bringing it into the world, procreating, right? That is what this 5th house is about. It's about creating stuff and bringing it into the world. I've actually got quite a few very successful entrepreneurs who have strong planetary energies coming through their 5th house because they're creating stuff and bringing it into the world. And this is creating spiritual stuff and bringing it into the world, bringing his psychic capabilities. Was able to create this and bring it into the world to share with us. And briefly, I don't want to go way overboard and make anybody confused. If you're super new to astrology, this might get confusing. Just follow along as best as you can. But when it comes to a natal chart analysis, if the sun changes from one house to another, I like to at least look at both. Okay, so when I switch over to a different house system called Placidus, what we're going to see is now his sun, we still see his Mercury and his Neptune are in that 5th house, but now his sun is, of course, still in the sign of Pisces, but now it's coming through the 4th house, which is the house of property and home and real estate, okay? It can have to do with, our home life. And I do think, really the sign of Pisces tends to be somewhat of an introverted energy anyway. Don't get me wrong, Rudolf Steiner was clearly, he had a lot of status. He was always out giving these lectures. Okay, and there's reasons for that, which we'll get to. But I do think he required some introverted time. A lot of people who are born with their sun in the 4th house can have a tendency to be somewhat of a hermit, especially if it's in the sign of Pisces or Cancer. So I do think he needed his introverted time. But I also feel like this could potentially, the combination of his sun coming through his 4th and his 5th could also play a role in, being an architect. okay, building homes sort of thing. Okay, now I'm going to flip back into the whole sign house system. That's the only thing we're going to look at in Placidus. The rest we're going to stick with the whole sign house system. Next up, let's talk about his moon. So this right here is a symbol for the moon. This right here is the glyph for the sign of Virgo. So what the moon rules over is like the emotional side of us. Okay, it's almost like our emotional drive, our level of receptivity. And the sign of Virgo is the perfectionist of the zodiac, the sign that pays very close attention to detail. Okay, it's the motto for the sign of Virgo is I analyze, a hyper analytical energy. Okay, so there's almost like an emotional drive for the perfectionism and for paying attention to all the little details of things. Okay, and furthermore, if you look right here, like where it's green right here, that's all for the sign of Virgo. And down here where it's all blue, that's all the sign of Pisces. If you notice, they're exactly opposite each other. Pisces and Virgo are always opposite each other. When somebody is born with their sun in one sign, that's the opposite sign that their moon is in. That means their sun and the moon, they're basically opposing each other, okay? When that happens, that the polarity and the reflex between these signs is so significant. It really stands out with people whose sun and moon are in opposite signs, that both of the signs really, really shine through. So here we have the mystic, Pisces motto, I believe, the very faith-based energy, the very mystical, spiritual, psychic energy, blending in with like the super sensible, the super, the analyst. And so he had both of these things. Not only that, but the sign of Virgo also has a lot to do with being of service. Clearly, Rudolf Steiner provided us with quite a few services here. But also his Saturn, which I'll talk more about shortly, but his Saturn in Virgo as well. Also, it's like he was a hard worker, absolutely hard worker, especially since his Saturn opposes, that's what this red line is here, between his Saturn and his sun, making that opposition. I think not only was he naturally, spiritually, psychically tapped in, but also super analytical and a perfectionist, but also put that to work. Okay, now, not only that, but also his sun and his Saturn come through the 11th house, which this is the house that's about networking with others, like associates and affiliates. Okay, he had plenty of associates and affiliates. Okay, and it's like the 11th house is often described as the house of friends, but it's not just like, oh, these are my buddies. It's more like the tribe, the connection, the networking with others for the purpose of mutually being able to support each other in some way, shape, or form. Okay, making connections with others where, hey, your business can help mine, my business can help yours, that sort of thing. But we're also friends. That's very 11th house. And with his his moon and his Saturn coming through here, Saturn's a very, very important key player in everybody's natal chart. Does quite well in the sign of Virgo, but really Saturn could do pretty well in all the earth signs. And again, it's like his work and being of service and connecting with others. Okay, so there's that. Now, I think the next thing I want to focus on is I want to go back to his rising sign. So again, here's the glyph or the symbol for the rising sign. Again, this is like the lens. Okay, this is a lot of times the rising sign is described as the persona, which this is true. The word persona can almost kind of be translated to mask, which that's the only thing that I would debate about that is the rising sign. I don't see it as just when we think of somebody wearing a mask, it almost seems like, oh, this is my phony self. I don't think of the rising sign at all as like the phony self. Again, it's the lens that he saw this whole world through and the lens that others saw him through. Pay very close attention to these Scorpio risings because they are intense and magnetic and fascinating people. They see the world through this very intense lens. Okay. And in fact, the rising sign is so massively important in people's charts that whatever celestial body rules somebody's rising sign, that means that celestial body, and the reason I use that term celestial body is because technically the sun and the moon are not planets. They are luminaries or lights. Okay, so whatever planet or celestial body rules somebody's rising sign, that means that celestial body is the lord of their chart. often referred to as the captain of their ship, the celestial body that is steering them through this lifetime. And not only that, but it kind of means that is going to be like the number one key player in their chart. So what rules Scorpio? First of all, Mars is the traditional ruler for the sign of Scorpio. However, in modern astrology, the ruler for the sign of Scorpio is Pluto. So I personally like to include both of these as the rulers of his chart, but especially for Mr. Rudolf Steiner here, because here we find Mars and Pluto also very strongly conjunct. They're functioning together, okay? Mars is what influences our physical drive. Mars is what makes us go do what we got to do, okay? But Pluto is our spiritual drive, our spiritual willpower, okay? Pluto is what can have this tendency to, put somebody through a deep, powerful, transformational process, which would require a strong spiritual willpower. Pluto is the bringer of death and rebirth, okay? And so, again, these guys are blending together. That's the combination of Pluto and Mars ruling Scorpio is what makes Scorpio so intense. So these guys are very significant in his chart. They're coming through the sign of Taurus, which I think was great for Rudolf Steiner, almost like a grounding rod for him, because the sign of Taurus is like the earth of the earth signs. He was so ethereal. He was so spiritually tapped in, but he also had this ability to stay grounded and bring the mysticism to like the practical side of life. And not only that, but also this is coming through his seventh house. Seventh house over here is the house of relationships. Of course, this could be applied to, romantic partner. He was married twice, but also business partners, that sort of thing. Anybody who you have a contract with. He had contracts with people, that's for sure. So that was a very strong, indication for those things in his lifetime. Not only that, but these guys also make a very, very strong trine to Saturn, who again is also in an earth sign. So that also, it's like, again, bringing that hyper spiritual, mystical, supernatural energy into the super sensible and practical, like being able to comfortably function with both. Okay. Now, next up I want to talk about is this Venus. This right here is the symbol for Venus. This right here is the glyph for the sign of Aquarius. So Venus is very much about what we are attracted to. Of course, that can be applied to what kind of people we're attracted to, but also just kind of what we're drawn to in life. Okay, now the sign of Aquarius is like the scientist of the zodiac. It's like the genius of the zodiac, the one that thinks outside of the box, the one that wants to rebel against, say, for example, we've all gone to public school and learned all this curriculum that's been put into this box and this Aquarius energy is like, no, there's way more cool stuff to look into here. Let's see what else, like what's revolutionary. Aquarius is very much the revolutionary of the zodiac. And in fact, I kind of want to go into a little sidetrack story here, but it's interesting. You don't really find much about Rudolf Steiner being a scientist, but I'd say he was quite the scientist. There is a fantastic book. It's called The Metal Planet Relationship. Very difficult to find. It took me 2 years to track down a copy of this book because it's just it's not being published anymore. But it's by Nick Kollerstrom. You look hard enough, you could probably find this book. They're out there somewhere. Nick Kollerstrom. The whole book is about the work of a woman named Lilly Kolisko. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. Lilly was one of Rudolf Steiner's like most recognized students. Okay, because this man was a teacher. One of his favorite students. We'll call her that. So she did this experiment. This is what this book is all about. And the thing is, she got this experiment from Rudolf Steiner. Like he's the one who came up with it. I don't think he was around long enough to be able to actually carry through with it. And so she took on the work. And what she did was in astrology, all of the celestial bodies have a certain metal. Okay, like Saturn is lead, Jupiter's tin, Sun is gold, Moon is silver, Mars is iron, Venus is copper. They all have their metals, and this is so interesting too because it all is, ancient knowledge. Our ancestors all knew this stuff. But what she did was she took, like, all these metals can be kind of brought into a salt, like the periodic table, like gold is AU. Okay, they're turned into these little minerals, like a salt mineral. And what she did, she took the salts of the metals and put that, like, individually, one for copper, one for silver, and she put it into somewhat of a liquid solution. And then she had filter paper where she took the now what it would be the metal salts in the liquid substance and put droplets on this filter paper and would just, leave them alone. There's pictures of this in the book, and the book really breaks all of it down for you in better detail. But when the moon, like, here's an example, here's Venus right here, here's the moon. The moon goes around the zodiac way faster than everything else. The moon passes over Venus and Mars and the sun and everything every single month because she moves through this thing every single month. So when the moon would transit over, we'll use Venus as an example here. The moon, like, if this is Venus, here's the moon comes along. I think it was exactly 10 minutes before it started, 10 minutes before the exact conjunction of the moon and Venus. Venus rules copper. The copper would go berserk on the paper, make all kinds of interesting patterns. And same thing with Mars. Mars is iron. When the moon would transit over Mars, the iron on the filter paper would go crazy. Okay, she did this for all of these things, and that was Rudolf Steiner's idea to do that. That is a scientist. If that's not a science experiment, I don't know what is. He was attracted to those things. In my opinion, that book kind of just straight up proves astrology is real. Okay, now that should lead me into, next I want to talk about his natal Uranus. So Uranus is one of Aquarius's rulers. Okay, Uranus is what makes the sign of Aquarius, like the one that would rebel against, the typical boxed in information. Uranus is a freedom fighter. Uranus is he's like an electrical energy. Uranus will mess with electromagnetic fields. Okay, Uranus is a rebel. Uranus is this energy of kind of going against the norm. Okay, and again, a very electrical energy, especially in the sign of Gemini. Gemini, the motto for the sign of Gemini is I think. Okay, it's a very intellectual energy. It is like the forever student of the zodiac. So if you picture this electrical kind of spasmodic, radical energy coming through this sign that's intellectually trying to, observe things all the time, the student, it's like his way of thinking was, and a lot of people are born with Uranus and Gemini, that generation. In fact, Uranus is just about to move into the sign of Gemini. And so it doesn't mean everybody's going to have these like genius ideas to come up with, new inventions and that sort of thing. But what we've got here is this right here is his sun. There's this red line that goes from here to here. This is a square. This is approximately a 90-degree angle. What a square does is it creates a force. It's like an internal tension with a force. It makes things happen. Okay. And so the sun sending this forceful ray at Uranus, the rebel, the one that thinks outside the box, the inventor, and then also a square over here to Saturn. These are very strong squares off by one. It's a 1-degree orb between the sun and Uranus, and a 1-degree orb between Saturn and Uranus. If you don't understand what that means, that's perfectly okay. Just follow along as best you can. Saturn over here is saying, okay, yeah, we see you've got some really wild ideas and you're onto something here, but we have to keep it somewhat practical. And through the sign of Virgo, it's all that Saturnian, and Saturn wants boundaries. Saturn wants things that are of a practical nature. Saturn wants us to be responsible, that sort of thing. Saturn doesn't want anything rebellious, especially coming through the sign of Virgo, but he's taking the wild ideas, the revolutionary ideas, and saying, okay, but we need to be able to put this in a format for the normal people to be able to understand. Okay, so there's that. I got excited when I realized the combination of those aspects. And again, we've got Sun opposing Saturn and then them both squaring Uranus. So there's a very strong connection going on between his Pisces mystical spiritual inner being, the rebel of revolutionary ideas, and then Saturn saying, keep it practical enough. Okay, now, next up, let's talk about his, let's go to Jupiter here. In fact, before I go to Jupiter, let's come down here to his second house. Second house is the house of like your earning powers. Second house is the house of finances, okay? Your values, when you make money, what you want to spend the money on. And everybody's got empty houses in their natal chart. It's really much more about, it's not like he didn't have the ability to make money, clearly. But what we've got coming through here is a sign of Sagittarius. The ruler of the sign of Sagittarius is Jupiter. I hope you don't get confused here. Jupiter rules Pisces and Sagittarius. But Jupiter, again, is faith-based, philosophical energy. I think that this is like the opposite of somebody who is materialistic. But he also knew, because he's got the grounding rods in his chart, he knew that he needed to want to be able to live comfortably. He needed like a practical, way of living to live comfortably instead of, well, we'll get into this a little further here. But for now, understand that Jupiter is the ruler of the area of his life that is his earning powers. And here's Jupiter up here in the 10th house, which is the house of career, the house of status, the house of recognition. Jupiter is the great benefic. This is coming through the sign of Leo. Leo is the leader of the zodiac. Okay. And so this is very strong energy coming through. It's like basically that alone gives him the ability to do something with his career and his status in the world that is very faith-based, very philosophical, be a leader in it. And in turn, he's making money off of that. He's able to, have a decent, material things in his life, that sort of thing. But also Jupiter's even more off the charts here because Jupiter, again, the great benefic coming through the sign of leadership in his house of career, very strongly conjunct his midheaven. This is like the point of career to get, so I don't confuse anybody. This 10th house, this slice of pie is the house of career, but this is kind of more like the point of career. And it's very strongly conjunct Jupiter. And again, it's coming through that sign of Leo. So that is absolutely fascinating to me. Oh, and also going back down to Venus here in the sign of Aquarius, him being kind of drawn to, maybe passionate about things that are of some sort of a rebellious scientific nature sort of thing. It opposes, there's this very strong connection with Mr. Philosophical here. It's what happens with an opposition. If you can combine, if you can integrate two opposing celestial bodies, they complement each other. They work very well together. These are the benefics, Venus and Jupiter. They're blending together. So again, it's like this, I'm drawn to things that are of a scientific nature, but I'm integrating it with this philosophical energy in the sign of leadership. And I get to show this off to the world because this is coming through my house of career, strongly conjunct my midheaven. Okay, so beautiful chart here, Mr. Steiner. I mean, honestly, I can clearly understand why this man was as well recognized as he is. Okay, now, the nodes. This right here is the south node, and this right here is the north node. Okay, if you've seen any of my videos before, you've heard me talk about the nodes, because I love talking about the nodes. The south node is kind of like our past life. It's an indicator of where we come from in a past life, like energy that we already mastered from a previous lifetime. This is coming through the sign of Cancer, which again, Cancer's another water sign. It's also very well recognized for its very strong intuition. Okay, so it's like he already mastered the intuition. Like the motto for the sign of Cancer is I feel. He already mastered the intuition from a previous lifetime. He brought it with him into this lifetime. Not only that, but this is coming through the ninth house. It's like the house of the expanded consciousness, the house of advanced knowledge. So this intuitive energy he already mastered from a previous lifetime in the area of the life that involves, things of a higher learning, things that are above and beyond your average public school curriculum. Now, in his lifetime, it's like what we do is we want to obtain the qualities of the zodiac sign that our north node is in. You're never going to entirely leave the energy of your south node behind. It's like where your instincts are. But it does become, we're meant to, in this lifetime, kind of lean more towards the energy of our north node. Okay, so his north node's in the sign of Capricorn, which Capricorn's like the most practical, yet ambitious, yet steady. Capricorn doesn't overexert itself. Ambitious signs can have a tendency to overexert themselves, but not Capricorn because it's an earth sign. It does things slowly and strategically. It uses what it has in its environment to work with. Okay, it's like the boss of the zodiac, okay? And he definitely, in my opinion, he's somewhat of a boss when, towards his adulthood. He really stepped into being a boss, but not in a bossy way. He was a Pisces, okay? All this Pisces energy does not equate to being bossy, but Capricorn energy gave him that kind of like authority in the world. And it comes through the third house, which is the house of communication. Okay, also has a little bit to do with mental function. But this third house, it's like when somebody's got a really strong third house, often they will become like an author or a journalist or somebody who communication, whether it's verbal or written, is just a very, very significant part of their life. Clearly, I mean, some astrologers will even refer to the North Node as like the point of destiny. So it's like clearly he was fulfilling his destiny here. I mean, in my opinion, the whole chart, everything all combined is the destiny. But clearly, I mean, he lived this chart, which let me just kind of take a last little look at this, make sure I covered everything I wanted to. I mean, there's so much more I could go into here. His sun also makes a very strong sextile, this green line right here, which creates opportunity with the rulers of his chart, Mars and Pluto. But then also, again, that trine going up to Saturn. I mean, this man was absolutely fascinating and incredible, in my very strong opinion. Now, a couple more things I want to say here is that about Rudolf Steiner, of course, he knew astrology. I mean, he wasn't an astrologer, but he very much worked with the cosmic forces, like I said, biodynamics, and also just for the understanding of, the collective of the world. He wasn't necessarily somebody who would sit down and give somebody a natal chart analysis. In fact, there's a pretty big debate in astrology whether or not we have human free will, where it's like some astrologers will say, absolutely not. The chart just shows our fate. That's what it is. That's what we came into experience. There's no human free will. Other astrologers will say, of course we have free will. The chart is more like a map to, how to kind of navigate through life and make wise decisions and raise our karma. Okay. Rudolf Steiner was one who very much entertained having human free will, to raise our vibration and to have better karma. So I found that very fascinating. For myself, I mean, honestly, I kind of go back and forth on it. Sometimes I'm just so astounded by how accurate the chart is showing itself with transits and everything. I'm like, well, maybe there isn't a human free will. Maybe this really is fate. But then other days I'm like, of course we have human free will. So I kind of go back and forth on this. I don't think I'll ever make a confirmed decision on that. But also one more thing I want to mention about Rudolf Steiner is that I'll leave some links to, you can do your own research on this. But something that I found very fascinating is the idea, the philosophy of the energetic and parasitic forces that come through. It's like Rudolf Steiner completely understood that there are spiritual or unseen beings, okay? Again, that we could potentially even connect with through spiritual practices. But the Ahrimanic and the Luciferic forces, like Ahriman or Ahrimanic forces, a kind of a parasitic force that comes through that turns people super materialistic. There, I have to have the best car. I have to have the nicest house. I have to, be on social media every day. I have to have all these great things. It's like being very overall materialistic. Okay, that's would be the Ahrimanic forces. And then the Luciferic forces will be completely the opposite. Like just woo, kind of off into the spirit realm we go. Which, of course, there's a lot of beauty with that. And I'm really simplifying this as best as I can here, but the idea that Steiner's idea was to find the happy medium between these forces. It's almost like these parasitic forces are here to keep us on track, to find what could be described as like the Christ consciousness between keeping yourself in a healthy flow, between falling deep into materialism or falling too deep into mysticism and forgetting. I mean, obviously we were having this very physical material experience is why we incarnated. Okay. And so we've got plenty other, I'm just going to end that there. Hopefully you guys know where I'm going with this. I really feel that Rudolf Steiner's philosophies made so much perfect sense. And this is stuff that he was talking about well over 100 years ago. Okay. So really fascinating stuff. Again, I'll leave a bunch of links in the description below. If you'd like to schedule your own natal chart analysis, your own astrology reading, you can schedule straight through my website, erinwageastrology.com. I can do a natal chart analysis. We can go into transits or things that are going on right now, like how your chart is being impacted currently or in the future or whatever it is. Progressions, medical astrology, whatever you want to go into, you can schedule your reading through erinwageastrology.com. You can also find a link for that below. And I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.